All right, so thank you all for joining us today on this seminar on the role of humanitarian actors in the Middle East in transition. A very warm welcome to all of you here at the Peace Research Institute in Oslo, and also those online. And this welcome is also on behalf of Caritas, MPA and NCA. It's been nice to collaborate with them on this seminar. My name is Cindy Horst. I'm a research professor here at the Peace Research Institute, and I have researched on a number of related topics, including how locally embedded assistance providers understand accountability. And I'm also we are starting a research project on how these local actors often operate in between humanitarianism, development, and peace building. So more on that later. Calls for an increasingly locally led humanitarian response have been very strong since the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016, but humanitarian practice has been lacking behind. So how can local actors rise to the huge humanitarian challenges that are there in Gaza, Syria, and Lebanon? What role do they play to address urgent needs, fostering long-term solutions, and promoting reconciliation amidst turmoil? And how can they navigate the complexities introduced by the recent UNRWA or upcoming UNRWA ban? These are some of the questions that we will explore. And with me, I have an incredibly knowledgeable panel who will help provide some answers. And I'm sure you understand that in 1 hour and 15 minutes, not all answers will be provided. In the interest of time, I want to guarantee the audience in Oslo also to ask some questions, at least. I will introduce all of them at a go, and then we'll take it from there. So first of all, Karam Abi Yazbeck, who is the regional coordinator for Caritas Middle East and North Africa. Then my colleague Jørgen Jensehaugen, who's a senior researcher here at PRIO. Then Raymond Johansen, who's the Secretary General of the Norwegian People's Aid. Arne Næss-Holm, who is the Director of International Programs at Norwegian Church Aid. And Ingrid Rosendorff-Joyce, who's the Secretary General of Caritas Norway. So we will start with introductions by Karam and Jørgen. And Karam will talk about the Middle East is changing. What is the role for local humanitarian actors? Karam, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. The microphone is okay. Great. I'm happy to be with you this morning and to have this chance, 10 minutes, to present quickly the situation not in our region. I will focus, as it has been said by Cindy, on 3 main countries: occupied Palestinian territory, Lebanon, and Syria. Just to introduce the topic, just introduce myself. As the regional coordinator for Caritas, we call it Caritas MONA, which is MENA in English, Middle East North Africa region. So Caritas, as a confederation, country, world, and with a different region. The region that I'm working in is the Middle East North Africa, and we have part of Horn of Africa, Djibouti and Somalia in our region. Today, I will not address all those because we have many crises in our region, unfortunately. We have a lot of work to do. But today, the focus will be mainly on the 3 countries, as I said, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. And our Caritases have different sizes in different countries. But now, the 3 focus countries where I will be focusing on, there are 3 relatively big Caritases. We have around 1,300 staff members with more than 3,000 volunteers. Caritas rely a lot on volunteering, and they can be adult volunteers or youth volunteers trying to help also in this field. to focus more on our topic, now in those three countries, the key issues that we are addressing and we're trying to cope with, one is the grave and continuous violation of human rights and international human law. As you all know, there is no need to describe this, but you all witness and we follow on the news everywhere the non-respect of the law and the violation. Second issue is the extensive attacks and massacres on civilians, and has been reported and we're seeing every day. Even now, when the ceasefire that should start in Gaza in 2 days, Sunday, until today, we still see every day, every hour, massacres happening, and the big issue is the civilian people. Yes, Israel talks always about Hamas, and I do not want to go into this, but at least if all the civilians being killed, reported, kids, women, and elderly, it's a huge number. We're talking about around 65,000 people being killed since 15 months, and a big majority of them are civilians. The third key issue is the massive destruction of infrastructure. Not only in Gaza, but also in Lebanon, the latest war that happened as well, and the use of illegal weapons, like uranium and other type of weapons. Fourth issue is the enormous displacement, especially in OPT, Gaza specifically, but also in Lebanon, South Lebanon, and elsewhere. And later I will explain a bit quickly for each country what is the situation. Fifth one is the target of aid workers, hospitals, ambulances, even schools and IDPs themselves, as well as UN agencies. They have been reported. As Caritas, also we lost 2 colleagues in Gaza with their families. They have been killed, as civilians where they were sheltering. The sixth key issue is the starvation strategy, which is still ongoing, especially in North Gaza. 7, disregard of ICJ ruling and UN resolution. And we have seen even some states, they were against those resolutions, as well as the UNRWA bill that I will not go into details because the colleague Jørgen, he will talk more about the UNRWA bill, but we have big concern about what will be coming at the end of this month. For Syria, very quickly, just to say that now for Syria as well, we have a lot of concern with all what's happening. Maybe change is always challenging for all of us. We don't like change usually, but change sometimes is needed. But at the same time, this change that happened is very mysterious. Until now, even Syrians, they don't understand how things happened, what's coming in the future. There's a lot of anxiety and stress about what will be coming. Caritas in Syria is working in 8 out of 12 governorates because of the situation. Previously, they were only allowed to work where the regime, Assad regime was present, but now there is possibility to be working on a national level. And in their work, they provide mainly emergency response, all type of services. I will not go into details, but from health to education to all type of emergency. As for Caritas Jerusalem, and it's called Caritas Jerusalem, not Caritas Palestine, because of, the sensitivity, the complexity of the context at that time. And they are working in especially West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem since 1967. In Gaza, as you see all those small red logos, they have mainly health centers. They work everywhere in Gaza, even in the north, and more than half of their staff is in Gaza, based in Gaza, and they were still working there, and they are locals. Most of them are locals working in Gaza. But they are also, of course, having the same challenges like all the people who are living in Gaza. In the West Bank, we do have also services, but also the challenge there, as you all know, is the situation of the West Bank, which is not one West Bank. And if we go back, we're in Oslo now, and if we go back to the agreement in Oslo, so it was supposed to be under the Palestinian Authority. But itself, the area is divided into 3 zones, area B, A, B, and C. And if you see the area C, who is totally controlled by Israeli, it represents more than 60% of the West Bank. So already this is a big issue. And now talking about ceasefire and about it will be implemented or not, today the cabinet will meet because already between ministers they have also different perception of things and point of view. They're not in agreement. So already this is not the solution. Ceasefire is just to stop atrocity. But peace and justice and all what's requested and the solution of two states, I don't know how feasible it is, but this is a big concern for all of us, even humanitarian workers being in the field. As for Lebanon, Caritas is one of the biggest in our region in Lebanon because of the different crises that Lebanon went through since the war in 70s and 80s and later on many different crises. Caritas in Lebanon, they operate on different levels. They have development programs, they have emergency programs, health programs, etc. And they are working all over the country. But at the same time, they are facing challenges as well. And lately, in this war that now, for example, the ceasefire started 40 to 45 days ago. And since that, and it's supposed to end by 27 January, which is next week. But until now, all this ceasefire was not being respected. And this is why now, with the ceasefire in Gaza, we are also skeptical and we're not sure about how it will be respected and to which extent, if it will be applied. But grosso modo, on a regional level, especially on those three countries, our main challenges are this is our priority. We have many challenges, unfortunately, but as priority, the volatile security situation. Because even with ceasefire, it's not guaranteed that people will not be harassed or violation will not happen. Bad economic situation with high inflation. And with all the crises happening and the war and atrocity, the population already is living through a very difficult time in the three countries. Not only, but in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza, there is a big economic collapse and high inflation. Restoration of basic infrastructure, health, home, and others, also it's a concern. Because even, for example, if we take the example of Lebanon, where still around the blue line, the IDF, they are still present, they are not allowing anyone to go there to rebuild, but also on other places that have been airstriked, there is a lot of damages for the infrastructure, basic needs. And people are not able to go back because many buildings have been destroyed totally. And for example, in Gaza, satellites photos shows that at least 60% of all buildings and construction has been demolished. So all this also is another layer of tension or challenge to overcome the problem. On a long-term financial logistical support, also it's an issue because we are all facing, and those of you who are working with international organizations, who are facing this donor fatigue and lack of funds. As well as advocacy effort, we're doing our best. This is my last slide, so much time to say that Federation present in this close relation with the Catholic Church, we benefit from this. Trying to do our best to advocate for what's enumerated there, the ceasefire, which now we're monitoring this, and we will be issuing a statement today, hopefully, about the ceasefire and the UNRWA bill, but also about all the other elements related to aid, respect, as well as arm embargo, because we are all seeing how this arm trade is being like a big issue for not only in our region, but globally. Thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this.
Thank you. So, because we've really already had this kind of introduction of the region, and my job here is to zoom in on the UNRWA challenge, I think I'll start just going straight into that. I think it's really important to underline that especially Gaza has, in addition to being, you know, a huge war on a terrible scale, it's really also been a war on humanitarianism itself. And I think it's just really important to highlight a couple of numbers just to illustrate what that exactly means and what I mean when I say that. So in the context of Gaza, this is the war in modern history. And because humanitarianism really is such a modern phenomenon, really in all of history, it is the war where the most amount of humanitarian actors have been killed. So we're talking 269 UN staff have been killed, 34 Palestinian Red Crescent staff, and 68 other aid worker staff have been killed in this war. So this is a huge number. I mean, 371 aid worker staff, and in addition, you know, somewhere around 1,000 hospital staff have been killed. But here the numbers are a bit difficult because there is an overlap between aid workers and hospital workers. In addition, the targeting of humanitarian operation buildings, shelters, etc., has been enormous. So basically, in addition to this being just a context of a terrible situation for humanitarian work, desperate needs, etc., the people delivering and the apparatus delivering that aid has been really, really destroyed. And then you put that in the context of the blockade as well, and you just get this picture of how hard it is to do humanitarianism in any way. Now, on top of that, of course, there is going to be a UNRWA crisis. Now, there's going to be an UNRWA crisis is really understating it, because UNRWA has been in a crisis essentially since 2018 with the first Trump presidency and his funding ban. But what's happening now is really a double crisis, because you're both getting a funding shortage because the US is not stepping up with its aid. Other donors like Holland and Denmark Holland and Sweden, sorry, are turning down their aid to UNRWA. But in addition to this, you're getting the Israeli ban. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, the Israeli ban, it's a double law. It's two laws. So the first law says that UNRWA will be illegal in Israel, Israeli sovereign territory. And by Israeli law, that means East Jerusalem. And that's, of course, in contravention with international law. But it means that in East Jerusalem, UNRWA will be illegal. So the local field office, the schools there will have to be, forcefully closed. In Gaza, what will happen is basically UNRWA will not allow to engage with Israeli officials, meaning deconfliction will be gone, international staff visa will be gone. It's going to be very, very difficult for UNRWA to work. And it's really important to underline what context. They are not just one humanitarian actor amongst many. They are really the humanitarian actor. It's not without reason that the UN as such call them the backbone of the humanitarian operation. And that is because they do everything that everybody else depends on. They do the warehouses, they have the on-the-ground staff. If you look at the numbers, UNRWA has 5,000 staff working on the ground, maintaining the warehouses, the distribution centers, the know-how. Whilst other humanitarian agencies are very important in what they do, but they very much depend on UNRWA. And if you take away UNRWA, basically the whole fabric of the humanitarian operation really, really falls apart very quickly. And come into effect on 28th of January. We don't have time, really. And estimates of what it will take to replace UNRWA, people say 2 to 3 weeks. And we have 11 days, right? So this is really, really serious. UNRWA does 17,000 healthcare consultations in Gaza every single day, right? So who's going to take over that type of scale of operation? And while I am very happy that there is, hopefully will come into place on Sunday, part of that, and this is good news, 600 aid trucks will come into the Strip daily. But if that happens, taking away the entire back humanitarian, it's a very, how will you distribute those 600 trucks? Who will be able to take over that type of operation, put it in place, and do the distribution, on the go? That's a really unanswered question. And I just want to end with the last point, and that has to do with the donor fatigue question. Because as very rightly pointed out, there is a huge donor fatigue across the world, both because there are so many crises, but also because inflation is huge, and because right-wing populism and all of that means that there's a lot of decrease in willingness to give aid. UNRWA is the cheapest option. UNRWA is really the cheapest structure on the ground. And it's very hard to estimate, but I've talked with experts who say that the other options cost twice as much, at least. Just because they have to adapt on the ground, they have to do procurement on the run, they have to really hire new staff with new types of contracts, do new deconfliction mechanisms and all of that. The cost of implementing that is so huge that you're suddenly asking donors to pay double, triple, quadruple, who knows, to do the same kind of things that UNRWA has been doing in the past, just because there is a political ban against that organization. And banning a UN organization, by the way, is an illegal move. So just to have that clear. I'll end there.
Thank you both very much for setting the stage. I would now like to invite everyone to sit in the front. So maybe Jørgen can be here and Karam on the other side, but then the rest can find their positions in the middle. So basically what we've now heard is that the situation is incredibly difficult in many places. And we've heard a little bit about different actors engaging with this. UN, the INGOs from Norway. And then, of course, there's also a lot of local initiatives. As we know, most of the assistance that comes in immediate crisis happens by neighbors, by civil society, by churches, by mosques. So I want to really zoom in to the question about how to support also that locally led engagement. We're starting with you, Raymond Johansen, an MPA. And the question I've posed to the three in the middle is how does your organization support local humanitarian actors in delivering life-saving support as well as promoting just peace in the Middle East? And I think we might start with a video first, so you want to, yeah? Yeah. Okay. Need some, yes, thank you.
جديدة ومنفتحة في هذا البلد الجريح تظل الجهات الفاعلة المحلية هي القوة المحورية في تقديم الشراكة الفعالة بين منظمة مساعدات الشعب النرويجي ومنظمة فهار في تقديم الدعم للمجتمعات المتضررة في شمال شرق سوريا. خطوة أمان وهو مساحة آمنة للنساء
supports organizations like Bahar.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very good example for our strategy of for how to support the civil society and the local organizations. And that has actually been our approach in Syria, which we started in 2012. And this Bahar is one example, and March is another example, which is very relevant. Then people from NPA, we also started to meet young people, which later become Mars, and that was really in the early stage of the war. And these were very knowledgeable people, and they had the local confidence. And then we established a system, then it was workshop, and then it's come more people, and then they build up the capacity. And actually, after the earthquake, this was one of the most important first responders. And then when they build up the capacity, they were also able to receive money from other donors as well. So this is clearly an example, and we have other examples like in Palestine, in Gaza, that we also find partners like the Farmers Union. Then we were involved in agriculture and how to find the right partners. And of course, then it was people that are able to and knowledgeable about agriculture, about the environmental change, and also cash distribution, which is a part of it. And then we started to cooperate with them as well. And they are first the responder. They are important there now as well. And as Jørgen said about UNRWA, it's extremely important because they have the infrastructure, but also the local organization, which actually they are there. They have the credibility, they know the cultural sensitivity, which is very important. And for us, as international organizations and as countries, it's extremely easy to do a lot of harm, to be too involved, to have a donor-driven agenda. Cooperation means cooperation. It means that we have to make decisions together. We have to build upon what they require and see as the most important priorities. So that will create a really good partnership. So I think different, and that's my last point, different from Libya. In Syria, there is a kind of a civil society. No, hopefully, and I think it's far away from that, trying to build a democracy. Then you have been able to strengthen the civil society with different actors. So at least that's a good starting point to build on a more democratic society. So that was not the case in Libya. No, we, since 2012, and other organizations as well, have been able to improve and enlarge. So I'm sure that this is the right path forward.
So strengthening civil society as a key.
Strengthening the civil society and local-led response, because they're the one, it's the same. After an avalanche, after a crisis, now we are talking about building up Red Cross and other, which is the first responders, because they are there. They know the local context.
Thank you.
It's not different from that.
NCA, Arne, what is your approach to this? And I think, again, we might be starting with a video. you as NCA support these kind of organizations?
Thank you. I think my friend there, Father Miletius, put it very well, actually, and so I will try to add to that. In addition to being an excellent director of Gopadur, he's an excellent singer, has a fantastic singing voice, which I've had the pleasure to hear as well. But I mean, sort of overall, I would say that local partners really do play a crucial role in NCA's work in the Middle East and have been doing that for decades. And one of the points that was mentioned now in this short video is exactly sort of the established presence. In some cases, in this case, we're talking centuries of presence in a country, in a region, and for some, of course, it's a bit newer. It's the established networks, it's the standing with the local communities, the acceptance, the number of volunteers that when it comes to life-saving humanitarian first response, they are there. It's a local community, as also Raymond said, who are responding. It's not us. It starts with the local communities and the local actors. Then our role will be to come in and sort of support to that. Can we bring in financial resources from our sources, which are maybe not accessible immediately to the local organizations? Do we have technical support that can be added as well to the first response? I mean, this is what we've seen after the Beirut blast a couple of years ago. This is what we saw after the earthquake in Syria and Turkey 2 years ago, and it's definitely what we're seeing, have been seeing in Palestine and have been seeing in Gaza. So on the outset, I think that local rootedness, the presence, the standing with the communities, within the communities, really enables this. Also the contextual knowledge and the networks that are present and in play. And I think what we can do is sort of, as I said, is to bring in the resources. Sometimes we can facilitate capacity strengthening on areas where that is needed. Sometimes we do also have a sort of a facilitation role, a connecting role. I want to mention an example from Iraq, which is maybe slightly beside the humanitarian angle, but it's how we can also connect sometimes the dots, where we had an engagement with religious leaders in Iraq when it comes to gender legislation in the country, where we brought together the national religious leaders, global ecumenical faith networks, to really work with the government of Iraq on gender legislation to be more in line with what we believe is the correct approach. I think that also goes for issues like social cohesion, which links to peace, which will be especially important in Syria, in Lebanon, and in other contexts right now, where local, whether it be faith leaders or other types of traditional leaders, community leaders, will be crucial when it comes to working on social cohesion between communities in a post-Assad Syria and in other post-conflict settings. And there, I believe, the key really is with those leaders in the communities, either it be leaders of faith or other types of leaders in those communities. I also want to mention the importance of advocacy, communication when it comes to bringing light to the issues that are taking place, to the grave human rights violations, to the grave violations of international humanitarian law, and the role that actors like either Norwegian Church Aid or anyone sort of sitting around this table can play and do play in bringing either politicians or journalists from Europe to see, to report what is happening, or to bring voices from our partners and from the communities to our context, to inform our politicians, our media, etc. I think that's also a crucial role in the work to strive towards justice and to rectify sort of the grave violations of the rights people have. So maybe just a few points.
Thank you. So it's also about rethinking your own role in a way in those long-term established relationships. Thank you very much. Inge, we've heard from Caritas already, but you'll add the overarching.
Thank you. Thank you. When I started as the General Secretary in Caritas in March last year, a friend of mine said, Yeah, I noticed that Caritas was quite quick to get into Gaza and also to get into Ukraine. And my response was, yeah, in Gaza and in Palestine, Caritas has been present since 1967 and built on 2,000 years of social and humanitarian presence in the region. So it's not something that we just discovered after the war in 15 months ago, and the same goes with Ukraine. That is because Caritas is the local organization, and it's the people living there who is part of the society and part of the civil society. So strengthening the agency and power of local actors native to the context is, of course, fundamental for our structure and methodology. And let me be quite concrete what this means. This means also that we prioritize transferring as much funding as possible to implementing partners. In our strategic partnership agreement with Norwegian government, we have transferred 86% of the funding. And as faith-based actors, our partners are, as I said with my story in the beginning, genuine civil society. They are there. They are integrated into their communities and are therefore present before, during, and after a humanitarian crisis. And we believe that this is a key matter of importance, that is partnering with genuine civil society, genuinely native to the context, as is the case with also our partners in the Middle East. Caritas further advocates strongly for sharing indirect cost contributions with local partners to ensure organizational sustainability, not just compliance with donor requirements. We also hold ourselves accountable by measuring the increased agency empowerment in our local partners as a result of our programming, breaking cycles of dependency through meaningful investment and equal partnerships. Examples of our localizations efforts include the Empower approach, developed by Caritas partner Caritas USA, CRS, to systematically build local partners' capacity to lead emergency responses, as well as pre-positioned funding, a model which supplies flexible resources with local partners to enable timely, locally led responses, empowering them to decide when and how to act during the emergencies. In regions like in the Middle East, where international aid has long been present, real change depends on placing local actors at the forefront, and the time to do this is now. Thank you.
Thank you. So then I asked all of you as well one main challenge and one idea of what would be a possible way of solving that challenge in this locally led kind of focus. So yes, Raymond, you want to answer that question?
Of course, no, the main challenge is the donor fatigue, generally speaking. We see here very right wing blowing, and for that, it's they are often against foreign aid, against refugees, and critical towards what we are saying integration policy in the Western countries and in US. So it means that we have to be much more offensive, that foreign aid, this cooperation works out. It's make a difference. We cannot just be backward leaning. We need to be forward leanings, that we together with other organizations, the private enterprises, private businesses, and others, it's it's the only way forward. So the donor fatigue that they will cut drastically, even in Norway. We have heard that the Progressive Party now wants to go down to 1.7. And of course, they will continue. Ukraine, probably also to have more refugees in Norway as well. So therefore, to be even more forward-leaning about this is really making a difference. And it's count. And we are in a position to create better conditions in the Middle East, in Sudan, and elsewhere as well. And that's meaningful and important for Europe and Norway. So that's the most critical point. And then local-led response is an important part of it, to building up democracy, to strengthen the civil societies. It's that's I think figure and the most important.
Thank you. Inge?
Add to what Raymond is saying, because yeah, of course, the lack of funding is key, but also that the locally led, the local actors, as a result of the lack of funding, they are also not being able to build their capacity, because then it's a short-term view on what's happening, and the lack of resources to the capacity building of the local actors is kind of it's a result of the overall lack of funding, but also gives us tremendous problems in the next round. So that's also just wanted to add. I have some few other points.
Arne?
I think Raymond mentioned the main sort of overarching issue for all of this, because without the resources, there's a lot of things that can't be done. But I also want to mention, in addition, if we are to have a more successful local development, it is also about having a seat around the table when decisions are made. So at the micro level, that's sort of inclusive decision making when creating projects. So for us, sort of internally, how do we actually engage with local communities in decision making when projects, when programs, when work is decided? And then also in the sort of the main UN coordination structures and other regional, national bodies of coordination and decisions, what is the role of national and local organizations around the tables where some key decisions are made on how to spend the funding we actually have? So sort of within the system, that also there is sort of some shifts happening, but it's very slow, it's very incremental, and I think more needs to happen on that as well.
Thanks. So I wanted to ask Jørgen and Karam, maybe starting with Jørgen, hearing all of this, hearing these different approaches, reflections on challenges, what would you like to add before we allow people to ask a number of questions as well?
I think the most important part from my perspective is that addressing humanitarian needs really takes for granted that we are in a crisis situation, that there is war, that there is blockade, that there is occupation, that there is etc., etc. We need to get to a stage where humanitarianism is not the issue, that education is the issue, that infrastructure gets working again, that trade gets working again, that you know, Palestinian civil society is not just kind of a luxury addition to humanitarianism, but is actually the core of development. And that's a different ball game. That's politics. And this is where it's really important that we go from this being a 42-day ceasefire to it being a 126-day ceasefire to it being a peace process to an end of occupation. I mean, that's, you know, I guess I sound utopian in this current context, but I think that's really the heart of the matter. The same goes for Syria, the same goes for Lebanon, right? Of course, the challenges are different in each context, but it means ending the crisis situation where humanitarianism is the answer, because that's kind of just medicine for a very, very sick patient.
Thank you. I will start from where Jørgen finished. I mean, about this utopia. I think it's not a question of utopia, because at the end it's a basic necessities and rights for those people who are under occupation, as we said. And the basic right for those people is to end occupation. Maybe we see it very long, and we are busy with our humanitarian work. We're not seeing bigger. But we need to keep thinking about it, because at the end now we're witnessing a big change in the Middle East. Maybe in the border. Demographically, it's clear and we can see it. And maybe soon we can see some change with the borders. I don't know if this might happen. But this is to say, like UNRWA also that you presented is an example of this big change happening and coming. And as you described, UNRWA, even salary is different than other UN agencies' salaries, the salary scale. So yes, I confirm that no one can replace UNRWA, and by budget-wise, it's going to be a tremendous budget, and we're talking about a shortage of funds. So how to make sure that the services can be sustained, and we continue on this. Yes, I believe that localization is one of the solutions, which will, beside the good use of money and budgets, also it gives ownership. Because even UNRWA, which is different than other UN agencies, is kind of localization that started a long time ago. Majority of UNRWA staff, they are Palestinians, working with their community, they speak their language, they understand the culture, and they are able to build this trust relationship. So I guess this is very important to keep an eye on advocacy, to keep advocating with our humanitarian work for the right of the people, for peace, for justice, not only peace, because also there's lack of justice in this piece of the world. Thank you.
Thanks. Very difficult questions also about what local then really means. What are local actors? Are UN staff local actors? Are Caritas offices in different places local actors? I think one of the overarching questions that I think everyone also can easily relate to is that we are dealing with citizens and services and needs that are normally provided by governing bodies, right? And then you have civil society coming in as well as international actors, and what are the different roles and what does that actually do to the relationship between citizens and their kind of governing bodies, and what happens in crisis. I think it's quite complex. Many things that were mentioned here are incredibly important. One thing that stood out for me is also this question of capacity building. What does that actually mean? What kind of capacities? Who has what capacities, and what is really needed in the context? So I think there's a lot to unpack further, but we have a really distinguished audience here as well. So I wanted to give you at least one round of questions. Usually people hesitate and then there won't be time. So for those who do want to ask a question, I would suggest you raise your hand and please introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. My name's Homer. I'm a former worker for a UN agency. I'd like to circle back to a word that I haven't actually heard today when it comes to donor fatigue, and that is remittances, which is a huge, important lifeline, especially following the port blast. It's probably the diaspora who've kept Lebanese people's heads above water. So how can we formally in Norway utilize remittances, which ordinarily are targeted for domestic individual bills, but to cooperate with the diaspora with advocating and lobbying the government for gift aid, so that, yeah, it's less painful for them and it's also beneficial for the person providing the remittances, because there's so much to be done. It's far bigger than developmental aid budgets, for instance.
Thank you, Homa. Exactly what I was saying. Yes, thank you.
Hello, my name is Mario Behrens, visiting researcher at PRIO. My question would be, there has been quite a bit of criticism towards the localization agenda that it has always also been quite a severe risk transfer. So when we look at the number of humanitarian staff killed in this context, it's overwhelmingly local staff that is affected by that. So my question would be, what would be your strategies in your organizations towards mitigating negative effects of risk transfers?
Thank you, Mario. So introducing risk as well.
Hi, my name is Wawan. I'm from Red Barna. We talk a lot about capacity strengthening, capacity building, and the standard we've been using to measure the local organization's capacity based on our standard, based on international standard. Have you then discussed a bit more about what is the minimum standard? Can we agree on a minimum standard that can be applied to local organizations that still fits into what we call a quality standard internationally? So something connected to, like, instead of speaking about they need a lot of funding, sure. How can we change that to be perhaps we agreed on a specific way of managing that to have just minimum standard? That's all. Thanks.
There's one question there at the back, and then I'll give you a chance to respond.
Thank you. I'm Christoph Leden from PRIO. I'm returning to the always a reoccurring question of the humanitarian principles and local humanitarian action. The principles of impartiality, neutrality. How do you see them applying to the local organizations that you work with? Thank you.
All right. So I've been rushing you all. I think Inge already said you had a couple of more questions. So now there is actually time. So whoever wants to start answering these questions or adding something that you haven't been able to say, now is your time.
All right, thank you for very good questions. To start with the question about remittances, it's a very important kind of amount we're talking about here, and sizable, and it keeps families and communities afloat. And I have to say that I don't think we have a good answer to how to engage with it, because we are used to engaging with established structures, organizations, and sort of entities like that. So when it's this kind of, it's massive in its totality, but it's also very individual. So I think it's definitely an important area which could have potential. But as I said, we are used to engaging with organizations, structures, entities, and I think that's why we haven't engaged sort of within that with the diaspora in Norway. But since you mention kind of transfers of money, which maybe dwarfs levels of humanitarian aid and development aid. Also want to take the opportunity to bring in that humanitarian aid alone, as said, it's a kind of a putting a band-aid or addressing the needs of very critical situations. But sort of there are so many financial flows in this world which are bigger and which are instrumental to the development of functional societies and civil society in many countries. So issues like debt, issues like taxation, issues like a UN Global Tax Convention, these are also crucial issues for organizations who are multi-mandated to address humanitarian needs, but also to address the underlying issues for injustice. So I just want to take the opportunity to sort of plug in that issue as well while we are in this space to talk about humanitarian action in the Middle East. I think when it comes to the issue of capacity building, we've had a quite honest discussion internally on what does it look like when we meet our partners and we engage with them. What are the minimum standards that we just have to uphold because they are either donor demanded, and we do also all kind of confront our back donors on what are the real necessary needs there, but some standards need to be upheld for everyone. But then beyond that, there's a really important discussion. Do we create mini NCAs, or do we actually genuinely take into account the local capacity needs, knowledge, etc.? So we have an ambition to move more towards the latter when engaging with our partners, but still there will there are still some foundational kind of standards that need to be there. I think Caritas probably has a lot to say on humanitarian principles and local actors, so I'll save that for you, Ingrid, and maybe Raymond. But and also when it comes to risk transfer, financial risks is one topic, safety risks is another. Also when it comes to financial risks, I think that is also for us important to address with our back donors, and then that also in kind of turn affects the level of financial risk put on local partners. But a lot of technical things there as well about sort of double punishment. If there is financial mismanagement, you sort of have to repay to the project. You also have to repay to the donor. So sort of who ends up losing here? Is it the rights holders, or is it us, or the taxpayers? And also on the safety side, I think we've also progressed to some extent in being more professional on things like security reviews, and also including partners in our planning, where we go, how we go in. But also ultimately, I think it's the choice for many local partners when they implement what type of risk they want to take. But it's important to have an open discussion about it and not enforce actions that would cause harm and too much risk. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on the locally led and the minimum standards, I think building a partnership with genuine partnership with people on the same level is also a long-term task. Somebody comes with the knowledge, that could be the local organization. Some come with the money, that could be the north organization from the north. So it is already some issues to address, but to build a genuine partnership with everybody comes with their kind of strength to the table. That is also a way to find what standards that we should build our relationship on. And of course, in the local situation in Gaza or in Sudan or in Northeast Congo, it is the people there who knows and should kind of be in the forefront, deciding what to do, when to do it, and also have a saying what in what should be done. And of course, it has to be ongoing discussion. Also, as you said, we have also back donors with standards that we have to take into account. But we have to also have this discussion also globally when it comes to what is the way forward and what is the risk. And this has also something to do with the discussion about what kind of risk are we willing to take on our behalf, on our local partners' behalf. It is impossible for organization from the north to say that you should not go into that area because to our local partners, because they would answer, but we are in this area. This is our neighborhood. I was in Ukraine in November, and we were pretty close to the front line. And of course, we had all these security discussions, and our partners said, "But this is where we belong. This is where we live." So it's really hard to come from the north to say that we should not work in this area because it's too dangerous. They are already there, so it's kind of also a theoretical discussion. It is not an option to not be present when things are happening where you live, and sometimes they are also not willing to move, and we have seen that also in Gaza. People would like to stay, would like to be where they were born and where they belong, and even though the risks are what they are, and even if they are emergency aid workers yeah. Remittance, it's a very, I don't think I have anything to add to the discussion now, but this is a very sensitive issue also. Because what is aid and what is, helping your family, and should this be part of kind of a, should this be part of national policy, or should this be organized in some sort? I think I see somebody here having more knowledge about this, and I have Marta there working in PRIO with also this, but I don't think I have a very good answer.
Just to say that you don't all need to answer all the questions,
No.
so just pick whatever you want.
I can be kind of transparent, saying I don't know. I don't have a very good answer on that one. Yeah.
Raymond?
I don't know that much. I don't know that much about remittance. I remember when I was in Eritrea, I was there as charge d'affaires, and then it was forced remittance coming from Europe. They have to pay 2.5% of all their income sending back to Eritrea. If they didn't do that, of course, then their families went into trouble with the regime. So I don't know that much about how that can be a part of our strategy, but very much would like to learn more about it. But from that angle, it was quite difficult, because we raised that issue also with the diaspora. I think it was more or less the same with some other nationalities as well. We raised that issue, and it's complex, but it's definitely a lot of money, and it's very effective. I think to mitigate the risks, of course, it's education. It's of course, I think to develop the partnership. That's an important part of our strategy. Doing that together, it's also very important not to be just donor-driven, because it's local. And on the other side, we are, as NPA, we are responsible towards NORAD and UD, and they are responsible towards us. It means that we have to take into account the Norwegian taxpayers, that they want to see, well, everything is fixed, and that will be a part of the whole strategy, not building a small NPA or NORAD on whatever, but it needs to be transparent, and of course to fight corruption. We have mutual interest with our local organization in doing that, but it has to be based on trust. The minimum standard, I don't know. It will start somewhere. Minimum, it's when you start to support, it's maybe from time to time. It's some few people. I mentioned Marsh as an example. They are now 400 employees, but they started as some very few persons, and then they have been able to build up and really be a big and important organization. So minimum, it's different. And I think that the humanitarian principle, it's an important issue. But of course, giving someone money, you give them power. And of course, it's neutral, but it's not neutral. But the kind of neutrality you have when you went into different conflict, of course, it's based on the humanitarian principles. That's essential. But I think you should not be naive in the way that when you went into a society with money and you built up also power amongst people that you actually support, of course, but you want to do that. But then to develop a partnership and learn to know each other and the principle, it's a part of that path forward. So I say, do no harm. It's important. And neutrality, humanitarian neutrality, important, but not to be naive, because money means power in all societies. So that sensitivity and that knowledge you need to have when you're on the ground is essential also to be real based on the humanitarian principle, impartiality and neutrality. So, yeah, thank you.
So I want to give the two of you the last chance.
So I will address mainly the questions related to capacity strengthening and minimum standards, because for us as a Caritas Confederation, we're trying to address this with one perspective. As I said, we're a confederation in 162 countries, and what we did to address this, since 10 years ago, we started a program. I mean, I don't know if it's a program or what we call it, called Caritas Internationalis Management Standards. With this, what we do is we assess each of our member organization. There is a process, a self-assessment, then followed by an external assessment to assess 4 different standards. We talk about governance, management, finance, etc. And 3 years ago, we added also a 5th one about safeguarding, which is very important in all humanitarian work. And now we started running an evaluation of the whole process to adapt it to all the changing environment. And why I'm linking this assessment to understand, to see what's the situation, if they are compliant or not with the minimum standards, not only on humanitarian level, but on other levels, but also it's followed by what we call improvement plan. So based on the assessment and where they have as challenges, the importance is to accompany them, and this is our role to do, this accompaniment to set an improvement plan where they need to put a strategy of improvement to improve the areas where there is some challenges or weaknesses. And our role will be also to provide whether capacity strengthening related to training or on-the-job training or any other ways and processes to support our Caritases, especially those in a weak situation or in a very difficult, complex context, in order to improve their implementation.
Thanks. I'll also just answer 2 questions, and luckily they don't overlap with yours. So I'm going to start with the risk transfer question. So, of course, this is very obvious in one sense. The risk transfer to local staff is just enormous. At the same time, in a war in a context such as Gaza, there is no zero risk for anybody. So if you just break down those 371 figure I highlighted, of those only 7 are foreigners. But I'm saying only in the context where this is a rather sealed area, meaning 7 foreigners is a rather high proportion of amount of foreigners let in. So the fact that 7 foreigners have been killed is actually a really, really high number. That being said, one of the most immediate effects of the UNRWA ban will be the end of deconfliction, meaning that UNRWA cannot anymore coordinate with COGAT saying we're moving the truck from here to here, we're having a humanitarian delivery here, our staff is here, because that communication will be illegal starting 28th of January, meaning the risk will just skyrocket. The international on-the-ground staff will no longer be there because they will have to be evacuated. So that risk transfer will be huge. And Commissioner General Filippo Lazzarini has really admitted as much. He's basically said, starting 28th of January, we will continue our work, but it will then rest only on the local staff and their willingness to continue. So this is really kind of, in many ways, the most extreme example of this risk transfer. At the same time, as has been really mentioned here, they know the ground and they make that choice. I'm saying this knowing that it's really hard not to sound unsensitive here, because this is a lot of people putting a lot of risk on the line. But that is kind of the fact of the matter. When it comes to the neutrality principle, I could hold a full seminar on UNRWA and the neutrality principle, because this has really been kind of the thing that has been chipping away at UNRWA for ages. And it goes to the school textbook question. And I know we're not here to talk about school textbooks, but it's really important. Because UNRWA, and this also goes to the localization debate, UNRWA doesn't have its own textbooks. but UNRWA runs tons of schools. UNRWA has to use the local textbooks, meaning that in the occupied territories, they're using the PA textbooks. In Syria, they're using the Syrian textbooks. In Lebanon, the Lebanese textbooks, etc. So funders then look at the PA textbooks and they say, we don't like this. There's bad stuff here. So UNRWA teaches bad stuff, is the accusation. And UNRWA says, we can handle this by doing extra training. We can do additional kind of humanitarian or human rights approaches. We can instruct our teachers to do so and so, but we simply have to use these textbooks. So it's this tension between like localized demands, which also come from the UN apparatus, and addressing neutrality. Now, what has been found, and this is a hugely politicized debate, what has been found is that UNRWA has stronger mechanisms of control than any other UN agency when it comes to neutrality demands. But they're operating in a very difficult environment. So teachers who are Palestinian, who have lived under decades of occupation, of course, they're not going to be very sympathetic towards Israel. I mean, that kind of goes without saying. So basically, the UNRWA line is that they have zero tolerance, but not zero risk. And so there is this continuous tension. What if a teacher says something that's unacceptable or posts a social media post that's unacceptable? And there, UNRWA usually goes, further than other UN agencies in terminating contracts and putting people on leave while investigation and so on. But it means that this goes into the donor fatigue question, because then donors see, there's all this trouble going on, we can't accept this, we don't want to give money to UNRWA. And you have this huge politicized problem going on.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the panel. Thanks all for being here, for great questions and interest. And there's a lot to be done, also research-wise, so I'm sure you'll be invited for new events in the future. Thank you, and have a safe journey home.